Hi, David Ellenstein here. I am really happy to be joined by Academy Award-winning actor and my friend Richard Dreyfuss, who is here to talk with us a little bit today about theater and other things. And Richard was going to be the honorary chair at our gala
It's
this
going
month,
to
but
be.
and we're postponing the gala, and so we're hoping it works scheduling wise for Richard and Svetlana, Richard's lovely wife, to be our honorary chairs when we do actually reschedule this event. So we're sorry we lost that, but at least I have Richard here to talk to a little bit. So what most people know about Richard is that he's a movie star and that he won an Academy Award and that he's been nominated and that he has done so many iconic classic movie roles. But what a lot of people don't know is how much theater Richard has done in his life and what an accomplished actor on the stage he is as well. So that's how I want to start off our conversation, Richard. Talk about what's different about doing theater, why you like to do theater, why it's important for the world.
Well, I'll tell you one quick story. In 2004, I retired. I had been doing movies and TV and theater for coming on to 60 years. And I knew I was done. And so I announced it. And there is apparently a law in California that says you're not allowed to retire from show business. So everyone said, no, you can't do that. But when I said that I was retiring, it never occurred to me that people might think I was retiring from theater, because I'm not, and I wouldn't, because theater is fun. Theater is a profoundly fun experience, and filmmaking is not. And filmmaking has all kinds of nice things, and it certainly can make you rich if you're smart, and it can make you famous if you don't watch out. But there's really, when you work in front of a camera, you have a whole other set of goals and experiences, because really you're working alone. You are working, the other people that are there are working. They're not watching you, they're working. And I can go through a whole litany of what's not happening during the making of a film. And in the most simple way I can say this is, when I do a play, I do it for fun. And it's much harder. People who equate work and effort and things like that, they say, oh, it's much harder and you have to do all kinds of difficult things. But to me, I've been doing theater since I'm 9. And if I thought that I had already done my last piece of theater, I don't know how I would handle that. I can handle not ever doing a movie, but the idea that I can't look forward to doing a play, that would be another kettle of fish.
So that sounds like more than just fun to me. What is it beyond fun?
Well, it's, when I was 15, 16 years old, I used to hang out with actors, and I would try to get them to talk to me about the nobility of it all, the size of it, because to me, that was what the experience was. It was also more fun than a kettle of fish. And I also knew that most of the people that I was growing up with in Los Angeles and New York had no intention of doing theater. They wanted to be famous movie stars. And I would say to them all the time, but you don't get it, because the fun is here and the profundity is here. And I, in trying to drag out of them what I felt, that there was a nobility to it, and that there was a depth to it, and there was a reason, that there was probably cause to say that acting, as in theater, is the oldest art form, the oldest of all, because when we all lived in caves and we came back from the hunt, someone went, and that was the actor.
That was Murray the Nut, wasn't it?
That was Murray the Nut. And
those of you who know the Mel Brooks reference.
Right. So, and I didn't want to feel that my future was going to be bound up by laser guns and funny ears and shooting aliens. I didn't want, to me, I was raised with Shakespeare's Variorum. And it wasn't that I came from a theater family. I came from a family that had 2 bathrooms, and I used one of them as my rehearsal hall. I would take a book or a play into the bathroom, and I would look into the mirror, and I would do the part or the play or the speech, and I would study my face and hear my voice and look close and look far and see if what the words were being supported. And then I had a chance. I got a gift from God when I was 16 because I saw John Gielgud at a theater in Los Angeles, and that changed my life.
So you and I both grew up in Los Angeles around show business and going to theater that existed in Los Angeles at the time. And I know I saw you in plays at the old Solari Theater in Beverly Hills on Cannon Drive. In fact, 10th Man is the one that I remember.
Yeah.
That one, but you did a number of plays there. So you were doing even when you were doing movies. You told me a story once about The Goodbye Girl, I think, when you were doing.
It was The 10th Man.
Yeah. So
when I did The Goodbye Girl during the film. I had a chance to do The 10th Man, and I called Ray Stark, the producer, and I said, would you mind if while we were shooting, I did this play? And he asked me about the schedule and how, was I ever going to get, turn to him and say, I have to leave now and I can't keep shooting and stuff. And in his own sarcastic but enormously loving guy, he was my mentor, and he made fun of me and he put me down a lot, but he also held me up, and he let me do The 10th Man while we were shooting The Goodbye Girl. And it was, for me, the perfect life. And I invented a game at that time, which was called The Perfect Day. And I would say to you, David, you have to describe to me a day that from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep consists only of perfect experiences within the realm of your reality. So that, for instance, one of mine consisted of, I'm in the 3rd week of rehearsal for Hamlet. I'm playing Hamlet, and I'm flirting with the actress playing Ophelia. And during the time that we're in rehearsal, a film I do opens to great reviews, and my mother comes down to see the rehearsal. And so the whole day was like that, all right? And a friend of mine, Carl, his whole day consisted, even though he wasn't aware of it, of giving things to his friends. He had a lunch that he paid for. He ran into a friend and helped him do such and such. And I said to him, your art form is friendship. And that's exactly who he is. So it was because of being filled up with what I thought was the splendidness of what I had chosen and what had chosen me. Sometimes I felt that I had been chosen by the muse to be the actor that I was. And I refused to accept that I had any limitations. I was completely in denial about the fact that I wasn't really very good. And that at the beginning, especially, I sucked. But I thought I was great. And I loved getting better. And you knew only in front of other people, only when you're doing the theater, can you tell, you know, when you're working in front of a camera, the other actors are doing what they're doing. The crew is working. The director is not even looking at you. He's looking at Video Village. You're working out of sequence to the point that if you tried to make linear sense of a film while you were making it, you couldn't do it. And then a year later, they ask you to come back and look at the work you did. And it's linear and it makes sense, but you're a year away and you've done 6 things since then, and they ask you to respond to your work. In the theater, everything is immediate, as you know, and there is something profound about laughter in the theater. And I knew that I was giving a gift when I made people laugh, that I could see it, that we walk around with such grief and such unhappiness and such reflexive self-loathing and other weird things, that when you make someone laugh, it's as if it's this little melody that sneaks into their body and just cracks away at the hidden griefs in the elbows and in the joints of the body. And I did this show in New York, Sly Fox.
Yes.
And
Volpone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sly Fox, the first act was good. The second act was great. The first act, I never felt as good as I could have. But the second act of Sly Fox was 17 brilliant comic actors going to town on an audience that, I swear to God, it was joy. And because I had a problem at the time with some lines, I was saved, by the other actors. And Elizabeth Berkley saved my butt, or Renee Auberjonois would save my butt. And there was so much glee and happiness. And I always, whenever I do the theater, I ask the artistic director to keep the lights up a little bit so that I can see their faces. And it makes the difference. It makes all the difference in the world.
I'm really glad you talked about the laughter, because, we just did The Outsider at North Coast Rep, this very funny comedy. And at this time in the world, it just seemed so important for people to come in and laugh and release and have that joy. And, as you say, get that grief out of their elbows and their knees and their hips, and just have a good time.
Film is not that old an art form, but even the first ones, when Preston Sturges did the film Sullivan's Travels. Yeah. Sullivan's Travels is about that. It's about what we're talking about. This guy goes through hell. He has the most horrifying experiences. And he's actually a film director, but he can't get anyone to believe him. And he's on this chain gang at the end of the film. And he, who has now started to say that he wanted to do drama, I want to make drama, he's suffering through this chain gang. And they go to a movie together, and they show the cartoons. and the joy and laughter that comes from the other guys on the chain gang changes his life. And it's so clear that we're talking about the exact same thing. He saw how miserable a life these guys led, had no, there was, and no one could do anything about it. But then there was come a moment when Mickey Mouse would hit Pluto or something, and they would burst into this extraordinary laughter that came from the heart. And boy, is there, if you want to give me a gift, give me a comedy to do.
That's great. So you talked about Sly Fox, and I'm sure there's other theater highlights that you've had in your life. Was there a film that you did among above the others that had a semblance of that? I mean, I know it's a different satisfaction you get from doing a film, but was there a film that you did that stands out above the others where you felt like more of this
Yeah,
the world? Which one?
The Goodbye Girl.
Okay. Why?
Because, well, I had taken my first vacation. I had started work when I was 9. And at no point between the ages of 9 and 27 did I ever take more than a week off from either doing a play or a scene or a TV show or something. Right before The Goodbye Girl, I went down by myself to La Costa just to kind of, relax. And I was supposed to be there for 10 days. And on the 10th day, I remember saying to myself, now, Richard, why exactly are you leaving? And I couldn't answer. And I stayed 2.5 months. And I walked into The Goodbye Girl filled to the brim with enthusiasm and creativity and energy. And we went into that film like that. And because the film was written based on Neil Simon listening to me read another play, we were reading another film, and he heard my rhythms and wrote The Goodbye Girl, so that it was intensely, it was so accessible and easy, and I could just put my arms around it every day, that I had no inhibitions of any kind. And I can honestly say that I didn't add. I'm an improviser. I add things all the time, and in that show I added one thing, and that was when I said the line "Buffo." That's it. Every single line other than that, Neil wrote, and I rehearsed it thoroughly. Loved the actors I was with. Loved the director I had, and at one point, at actually many points, but one point in particular, we were shooting a scene, and Herb Ross said, "Okay, we're gonna break down the master and go in for close-ups." And I said to him, "Let me do it one more time." I said, I have an idea. Just let me do it one more time." So he said, "Okay." We did it. And at the end of that master, Herb Ross turned to me and gave me the best compliment I have ever received to this day. He looked at me and he said, "No coverage." And that scene is in the film exactly as it was shot in that last master, because I had touched it. I had found it. I got in the zone, and and people knew it. There were people on the crew, and Marcia and Neil and Ray, who would come and say wonderful, nice things. My mom came to the set on the day that we were shooting the rooftop scene. We're in Hollywood. It's a New York rooftop. False rain. I'm in a tux. Marcia's in an evening thing. We danced. I sang. I kissed Marcia Mason. My mother thought that she had died and gone to heaven, and that it was the perfect day for her to visit the set. And it was.
But talking about how that can happen, that kind of perfect kind of creative environment so that inspiration can happen. What is it? I mean, I always try and create that in the rehearsal process, you know, create trust, create a confidence in the artists to be able to make mistakes so that they find the thing that they would never find if they were trying to be careful and do it right. Giving permission to do it wrong, get it wrong. So how does that happen? What is the magic that needs to happen to make those incredible things happen?
Whenever anyone says to me in preparation for a film, what do you need? They say. And I say, I need a loving, creative, and relaxed atmosphere. And that's it. And if I have that, I can do anything.
There you go.
If I'm there, I say it because there are certain people, directors or other actors, rare, who really feed on conflict and hostility or stress. And I don't. I lock up when that happens. But if you enjoy the day, if you enjoy the actors, then you are in a constant flow of giving and taking and being willing to risk anything. As a matter of fact, when we did The Goodbye Girl, I was so frightened of doing the Shakespeare, which is the payoff, that we never rehearsed it, ever. And I say, every time we came to it, I would say to Herb, well, let's do this tomorrow. And so tomorrow finally came. In the last 2 weeks of the shoot, we were in New York at the second stage and shooting the show of my doing Richard III. And Herb looked at me and he said, well, there's nowhere for you to run now. And he and I went backstage to pick the costume. We had not talked about any part of it. So he didn't know what I was going to wear. I didn't know. And I picked the stuff and we set up the first shot, which was the first moment of the play. And all I can tell you, David, is we shot 2/3 of that play. We had so much fun doing Richard III as a gay crazo, that we just kept shooting it and shooting it. More scenes and more scenes. And it was just by luck and circumstance and my eccentricity that I knew the play. I knew the whole play. Years later, Powers Booth turns to me and says, I killed you. I said, what? He said, I'm the guy in Goodbye Girl. I'm the actor who kills you in Richard. And I had never known that. And there was also secretly a very well-known porn star who was in the company doing Richard. And when I saw him, I said, hey, I'm a fan. I'm a fan. And he went, and so he's in it. And there is something about actors. I can only tell you that Marcia, for instance, is the perfect actor. When a year earlier, I had flown to New York to see Marcia Mason in Richard III in Central Park. As the play started, the actor who was playing Richard went, now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by the son of York. And I turned to the person I was with and I said, we're leaving after the Queen Anne scene. And I didn't know it, but Marcia, who I had not yet met, who was playing Queen Anne, at the moment the lights went up on that show, she turned to the director and handed in her notice because she had hated what the guy was doing and she couldn't quit until it opened.
Oh,
So when we did it together, it was like old home week.
yeah.
And you know, there was a period of time when Marcia was nominated every year for Best Actress.
So she was married to Neil when you did The Goodbye Girl?
Yep.
And was that any kind of weird pressure or strangeness?
It was great.
Yeah.
I felt like I was their son or brother-in-law. No. There was nothing bad.
Yeah.
Nothing. Even Ray, who he makes a living by trapping flies and torturing them, you know, and at the same time he builds theaters, and he was great. He was like crazy person. But in the middle of The Goodbye Girl, wait a minute, not in the middle. After I had won the Oscar, about a year later, they asked me to do Othello in Atlanta. And it was turning into a really great production. It was, as a matter of fact, I think the best Shakespeare production I've ever been aware of. This one particular, Paul Winfield played Othello.
Yeah.
And Kristen Linklater was in the show, and it was amazing. And I decided if I could, I would tape it. And so I called Ray and I said, would you loan me $300,000? And I told him why.
Yeah. And
he said, after all your other so-called friends turn you down, come back to me. And I did. And he gave me $300,000. And I have that show still unedited in a storage facility in LA. And what we did was, after the show every night for about 2 or 3 weeks, we would set up and we would shoot Act 1, Scene 1, then Act 1, Scene 2.
Okay.
And we did it in 3 weeks. We had the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because it was so well done. And Paul, God, there are times when Paul Winfield is the kind of actor who, you know, his hands are attached to his thighs, and he moves with this grace that is not French or European or Asian. He's an American, and he moves with this profound grace, so that the last major line in the play was, I have done the state some service, and they know it. And then his hand would go from here, this commanding, to this. No more of that. And every night I said to myself, I'm going to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
Because it was so beautiful. And it told the whole story.
Psychological gesture, right?
Yeah.
Right. The Michael Chekhov, the great teacher.
Yeah. And we all have, you know, we've all done shows where there were great moments like that.
Right.
I have to say that Paul rose above, and he made Othello. You know, Othello only works if you forget that it's based upon him being an idiot. You know, if he only asked one question, the whole thing would have fallen apart, but he never asks. And there's a very famous essay about Othello called Othello as Fool. And the trick of doing Othello is never to let the audience think that.
Yeah.
You know, and so Paul goes from this commander to the victim of a jealousy he can't control.
Isn't so much of that in on Iago, though, being honest Iago?
Oh, yeah.
Othello must believe that Iago is honest Iago, because as soon as Iago is a villain to Othello, there is no story, right?
That's right. That's right. The actor who plays Iago must never allow Othello to see what he's really thinking. And I have to tell you, my son Harry was going to high school in Idaho, and I went to see him playing Iago. And my son Harry has a great acting talent. He just doesn't want to be an actor, but he is a great actor. And he had, talk about a psychological gesture, he had a moment at the beginning of Othello where he's talking to Othello, who leaves, and Harry's back was to the audience. And if you don't mind, if I can do this, just imagine, can you still see this?
Can't see your face, only your back. See your hands, yes. Yeah.
Can you see my hand?
No.
You can't?
Can't see your face, can only see your hands and your back.
Okay, you can see my hands though.
Yes.
All right. When Othello left, Harry went like this, and only the audience could see it.
Yeah.
Can
you raise your hands just a little bit, Richard? Here we go. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
He gripped his fist, and you know that he hated that man.
Right.
And I didn't tell him to do it, and I don't know where he got it, but it was genius.
Yeah.
It was a psychological gesture that totally, and that, there's a speech in Othello which basically is, boy, this is so much fun. I never realized how evil could be so much fun. And he has this great thing. And I loved doing that speech. And then I saw Harry do it. And I realized I could spend my life going from Othello to Othello to Othello. And I did for a long time go. I used to say to myself, I will never let a praised Hamlet go unseen. And I used to fly to London all the time just to see one Hamlet fly back. Albert Finney, a whole bunch. And each of them taught me something.
Yeah.
And I wanted to play that. I still do. I want to play it on the radio.
Jumping back a second, does that footage from The Goodbye Girl of all that Richard III stuff that you filmed exist? And have you ever seen it?
God, I have no idea.
Wouldn't that be fun?
It would be great. My God, I have to find that out. If it does exist, if for any reason Herb kept it, I'd cut my arm off to see it. Jesus.
So I'm going to change the topic just a little bit here, and you've spent a lot of the last recent years of your life on the Richard Dreyfuss Civics Initiative, and your a passion about civics having disappeared being taught in our country, and how important that is and what a need for it is. And the reason I'm bringing it up, and I think there's so much overlap, is I think the theater is a civic important thing that happens in the world, and feeds right into that. Can you just talk briefly? I know you could talk for a couple hours about this, but could you just talk briefly about what it is about civics and why you've committed so much of your time and energy and resources to bring that to the forefront?
Yeah. First of all, America came into existence after 10,000 years of barbaric cruelty inflicted by 2% of the population on 98% of the population. That from the very beginning of civilization, before Ur, before Mesopotamia, before Pharaonic Egypt, man had already come upon the way that man would treat man. And that was that those who were haves tortured those who were have-nots. And they could do it because they had the money to hire terror, and they kept their populations in absolute terror. And I'm not talking as if this was sometimes, this was always and everywhere. That's the way the world was. It was a world of total darkness. And asking to learn how to read was a crime that got your fingers chopped off. And 98% of the human race lived in that servitude and that bondage and that terror. 2% is what historians write about. You know, they write about the commanders and how interesting they are and all that, but they never talk about the men in the armies and their wives and children. And there is something about humanity that allows us to think of people who are poor as evil or bad. And I remember when I first read, when windows were discovered, were invented, they were taxed. If you had a window, you got taxed. Now, if you were rich, it didn't matter. But if you were poor, it mattered. And you were illiterate, you couldn't read, you couldn't write. If you asked for that, you got punished. And you couldn't move, and you couldn't worship God as you wanted. Everything that we think of as virtues and values were denied to 98% of us. And then there was a flurry of philosophers who talked about another way of doing things. But that was just talk by caged philosophers who were pets in salons in France. And, you know, some rich woman would say, oh, let's bring Voltaire out and have him say those funny things about equality. And we, across the Atlantic, we had time to look at Europe, and we had time to think. And we had something that no one even now really recognizes. We had 200 years of peace on this side of the Atlantic, and we developed a middle-class society. And when the war came to free us from Great Britain, that's not the revolution. The revolution came in the Constitutional Convention in 1787 because we fired monarchy and aristocracy and handed power to the common people. That's a revolution. And it's that step of courage and that step of trust that, regardless of what anyone may say now about how they weren't serious, they weren't real, they were really, it was fake. It wasn't fake. It was written in clear English and still is. And we handed humanity a gift that said you could reach for the highest you could possibly be within your own lifetime. You can reach above yourself and attain however much you can. And for the first time in history, people could get up above the station they were born into. And if they could have, they would have come over here and strangled every one of us in our beds. And we changed the goals of mankind. We literally, over the next 200 years, changed the goals so that people realized they could actually be better. They could actually get to a better place, which had never happened, ever. So I was raised by deeply political relatives and friends to honor America, to honor this place that, through all kinds of virtues and vices, came to the conclusions that they came to in the Constitution and in the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights, when you think about it, is the most staggering act. They not only wrote down the things that the nation could not do to you, the limits that it put on the nation, it gave people freedom, and it wrote it in clear English. No one can stop you from speaking or worshiping or printing, or and you had to have a rule of law. No one had ever done any of this. No one had ever given the poor people of the world what we gave them. And it took them 100 years to believe us. But in the middle of the 19th century, Europe went nuts, and they call it the Rising against the Habsburg dynasty. It was not. It was the poor of Europe rising up and saying, we want what they've got. And we started the largest voluntary mass movement of humans in the history of civilization. And it would still be going on. And we really did do this. And it's been a constant struggle between special interests and the people and the various factions within the country. But what is undeniable is that we did this thing that had never been thought of, never thought well of, and now it's been taken away. It's been taken away either by the native stupidity of the people that are living here, or by the conniving of special interests. But now, learning a radical doctrine of governance, such as we have here, doesn't happen in schools. The next generation is not taught anything at all about this government. But civics is not just government, it's also the foundation of a civil society. And I mean the civility that people can talk to one another within. And all of these things are learned things. You're not born knowing the 10 Commandments. You have to learn them. And you're not born knowing the rules and regulations of the United States of America. You have to learn them. And if you don't learn them, you don't have them. And we don't have them because it's been removed for the last 50 years. 4 generations of kids have gone up and through our education system, and they have no knowledge at all of the rarity of the pearl that was created and exists. And so they don't honor it. They don't respect it. They think everybody has it, and they don't. So I think that there are certain moments in the history of mankind that are moments of enormous loss and tragedy and enormous gains, and allows us to see that we are aligned with the angels. And the establishment of our Bill of Rights, our Constitution, given so freely to so many people, is one of the greatest achievements of mankind. And to lose it for no reason, and to revert back to the savagery that we've lived within for the overwhelming history of civilization is not something I can even contemplate without feeling a horror.
You have to do your part, and you have, and I commend you for it. Richard, I'm going to say thank you, and I want to thank you personally for your support and your caring and your gifts to North Coast Rep. You have been awesome for us. It's an honor to me that you believe in what we're doing at North Coast Rep, and that you've invested your time to help us to thrive. And I can't thank you enough.
I have to tell you that
Yeah.
my ambition now, and it has been for, since we moved down to San Diego, is I once had an experience when I was a teenager, which was the first shock, emotional shock of my life. And I really kind of was unbalanced by it. And then I regained my balance when I heard myself saying, Richard, you can always make $250 a week in rep. And when we moved down here, I came to the theater, and you and I met, and I thought, I can always make $250 a week in rep. and I think of your theater as mine. I think I mean it. I mean it. And I used to have this out with Gordon Davidson, because I thought that the Mark Taper Forum was mine.
Yeah.
And he said, it's not, it's mine. So I know if circumstances allow, we will do theater.
That is awesome. I only have 2 words for you. You know what they are? No coverage.
Let me tell you, when you started to wind this up, I said, oh shit, have I talked too long?
No, I thought it was perfect. I hope everybody else thought so, but I thought it was like, I thought we did most of, we talked a lot about theater, we talked about film, and then you need to talk about what you're passionate about. And I wanted you to share that with our audience at North Coast Rep, because you're an amazing guy, and people need to know that you're a great actor. Everybody knows that already, but they don't know this part of you, or a lot of people don't, and it's important. And
one day we'll figure out a reason, but I would love to just tell you stories about the theater that I've experienced.
Let's make a date, and we'll do this again soon. Okay.
You got it.
Thank you, Richard, so much.